Over the summer, I worked on an art film with my next-door neighbor, Nisa. It was a 2.5-minute emotional display with fancy camera work and exquisite lighting. As a helping hand, my role in making the movie was inconsequential, but I enjoyed assisting my friend in learning about film production, so I spent long afternoons working on Daydream Girl. I would decorate scenes, arrange lighting, and converse with the camera crew about perspective and scene placement. At first, I had no idea what they were talking about, but I learned quickly and soon became instrumental in the creation and execution of Nisa's film. When we were making the movie, I became caught up in the technical aspects of the film, involving myself in the busy work and rarely giving thought to its meaning. This is partly because, knowing Nisa, I accepted the film at face value and chose not to augment my understanding of her by analyzing the film. I had known Nisa since I was 7 years old, and she was always a wonderfully peculiar girl. As a child, she invented her own games, role-played with an entire town of toys, and often drifted into her own world, far from the likes of planet Earth. Simply put, her imagination had no bounds, and she constantly lived within it. For all I knew, Nisa was Daydream Girl, and making her movie was the only way she could reclaim her metaphorical jar of tears. Something changed when I revisited the experience months later. It was Friday night. I was sitting in my cluttered room, dawdling around, and waiting until Saturday to get my life together, when I came across a message from Nisa. She had sent me a link of her movie on an off-brand video server, and having never seen the final product, I couldn't help myself, so I clicked it. I watched, reminisced, and for the first time, gave serious thought to Nisa's possible perspective. It was almost as if the jar of tears contained the comfortable hidden sadness that helped her outwardly portray her bubbly exterior personality. Maybe her daydreams and moments away from planet Earth were melancholic in nature. Maybe Nisa was sorrowful most of the time, and no one ever knew. At the time, I felt pretty good knowing that most of the people in my life, at least to my knowledge, were fairly happy. In my family, the only person suffering from depression was my grandfather, who as of late had been coping with the trials and tribulations of Alzheimer's disease. The more I thought about his disorientation, the more disoriented, frustrated, belligerent, and remorseful he became. Every 30 minutes he repeated his behavior, shifting from, "What's going on?" to, "Why can't I go to the bathroom?" and "Let me die," followed by, "I'm sorry, please forgive me." His last words, the last words of every sentence he spoke, struck me so vividly. They stood out because my grandfather was never a sorrowful or forgiving man. He was the kind of man who slumbered and awoke to a clean room, a clean desk, and a clean nightstand every morning. I remember walking into his bedroom and taking a mental note of the 4 items neatly arranged on his nightstand. There was a picture of his loving family closest to the bed. Right next to the frame was an emblem of the family business, and a thank you letter from a college graduate. At the very end of his nightstand, Gramps kept a horsewhip, which he never needed, but once threatened to use against my uncle, who at the age of 6 had done quite a few bad deeds. My grandfather believed in raising a loving, disciplined family. He was a man's man with nothing to be sad about or ashamed of. But who knew if Gramps was really plagued on the inside? So many successful, loving people hide their insecurities in masterful ways. Maybe Gramps had harbored a jar of tears for all those years, and no one ever knew, because there seemed to be a sadness and shame inside him, only to reveal itself once the jar, his sanity, were missing. I've been scrolling down these ideas in mind for an essay that connected the dots between my summer with Nisa and my grandfather's emotional turmoil. I let these thoughts ruminate and waft around my brain as I listened to the tragic soliloquy of a family friend before an audience of churchgoers. His parents had passed away in a car accident, and he was left to pick up the pieces. He said beautiful things about his parents, things he probably wouldn't have said if they were alive and well. He talked about the cake his family enjoyed every night, the sailing adventures with his dad, and their college road trips. All the while, this tough-as-nails son of a gun stood there and wept while he told the story of Anna and Adam. Like Gramps and even Nisa, he found a way to show a different side of himself after loss ensued. Loss of time, loss of sanity, loss of parents, and now I was losing my composure as I sat there in the aisle and cried like I haven't cried in years. I cried because I imagined myself standing before everyone, speaking on behalf of Gramps. It was as if failing to connect the dots brought me closer to the heart of the issue. First I refused to analyze, then I overanalyzed, and now I understood. We casted shadows in almost every scene, always shrouding the picture, always observing from a distance, until the thing we feared could no longer be hidden, locked away in a jar, it presented itself to us. I had spent my summer, that Friday night, and this last hour in church distancing myself from the inevitable, the reality of the situation. I guess bearing your soul in an art film, losing your marbles, getting up on the podium and giving your heart out are all ways of losing your jaw and letting reality present itself. But reacting to all of it can be just as effective. I've been sad about my grandfather for a while, and no one ever knew. I didn't even know, but now I do. For all I know, maybe I'm Daydream Girl.